Okay, so using reference angles. I'm going to show you the long way. A lot of students like to just have that unit circle handy and they just look it up on the chart. For me, it's easier just to memorize a couple things. You know, I know sine is 1/2, and sine of 30 degrees is 1/2, and sine of 45 degrees is square root of 2 over 2. And then I'm good to go. I use the information, but it does require thinking, which is good. So, you know, I'll just say that. Okay, so part A. Using a reference angle, find the exact value of cosine 150 and sine of 150. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm picturing, where's 150? Well, here's 180, and here's 90. So I know it's in the second quadrant. Okay, so 150. How can I figure out the reference angle? It would be right there. It's going to be 180 minus 150, which is 30 degrees. Okay, now I know I want to get then the sine and cosine of a 30-degree angle. So I'm going to, do my thinking cloud here and say, I know the cosine of, well, I'm going to start with what I know. I always start with the sine. Okay, sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. And the cosine of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. So this is like what I'm thinking. It's not the answer, it's just my reference angle. Okay, so I want to remember the sine of 30 degrees. Okay, now I'm in the second quadrant. So what's positive and negative? So x is negative, right? X is negative. That means cosine is negative. And then I have to go up, right? So that means y is positive. And that means sine is positive. Okay? So then I'm going to say for part A, the cosine of 150 degrees is going to equal, I did cosine first, right? Cosine was negative, so negative square root 3 over 2. And then the sine of 150 degrees, 150 degrees, is going to be positive 1/2. So I put all that information together. I draw a picture, I figure out the reference angle, I remember what the cosine and sine are for the reference angle, and then I figure out, well, which one's negative and which one's positive. That's the long way, but it's good to think about those things, because not everything's a special angle, not everything's on the unit circle. Okay, B. Now it's in radians, right? So 5 pi over 4. Where is 5 pi over 4? So let me draw another coordinate system. This time we'll do it in pi. 0, pi. This is pi over 2. And then this is 3 pi over 2. So I'm in fourths, right? Okay, so this, if I want to think about it in fourths, that's 6 pi over 4. Okay, so I'm in, and then pi is 4 pi over 4. So I'm between pi and 3 pi over 2. I'm like halfway in between there. So that's going to be 5 pi over 4. Now some of you might be saying, well, couldn't I just change it to degrees? You can. But at some point you got to work with the radians, so 5 pi over 4. Now, how do I figure out the reference angle? Well, it's going to be right there. So it's going to be 5 pi over 4 minus 4 pi over 4. So you kind of have to get used to changing to that common denominator thing. So it's pi over 4. If you're thinking in your mind, hey, that's 45 degrees, good for you. So I know sometimes it's easier to think in terms of degrees, but maybe some people would rather just always think in terms of radians. Kind of which way ever you were taught. Okay, so I need a reference angle of pi over 4. So my thinking cloud, I say, well, what is the cosine, or what is the sine? I always start with sine, of pi over 4. That's the square root of 2 over 2. Secretly in my mind I was thinking 45 degrees. cosine pi over 4 is also the square root of 2 over 2. This is the, whoops, here goes my screen. Thanks. I'll just do that. This is my thinking cloud, okay? It's not the answer, it's the reference angle. And so now what I want to do is write out the cosine and the sine of 5 pi over 4. So cosine of 5 pi over 4, which they didn't put parentheses around it, that was their choice. Okay, now I'm in the third quadrant, so what's negative? Both are negative, right? Okay, so negative square root 2 over 2, and then sine of 5 pi over 4 is also negative square root 2 over 2. You're in the third quadrant. Okay, so they're both negative. Let me do one thing real quick on this video. So this is what we do sometimes to remember that which ones are positive and negative. All are positive in the first quadrant. Sine and cosine, positive. Sine is positive in the second quadrant. Sine and cosine are not positive, so they're both negative in the third quadrant. And then cosine is positive. So I'm just doing the positive ones. They're all positive in the first quadrant. Sine is positive in the second quadrant. In the third quadrant, sine and cosine are both negative. And then cosine's positive in the fourth quadrant. It'll be easier when we have the other trig functions.